I was standing by the casket, white lilies trembling in my hands, when Andrew's whisper cut through the funeral silence like a blade. "We just need her gone. One way or another. Dad's money should be ours now." Milani's response made my blood freeze. "She's old, might not take much, and once she's out, we get the keys to everything." Their quiet laughter echoed in my ears louder than the organ music. I stood there, 68 years old, watching my husband's children plot my elimination just feet from his body. The grief I'd been drowning in suddenly transformed into something much sharper. My name is Sylvia Argent, and I had just discovered that the only family I had left wanted me erased from existence. The funeral parlor felt suffocating. Mourners filed past, offering condolences, but all I could hear was that poisonous conversation replaying in my mind. These weren't just greedy stepchildren anymore. They were threats. I clutched the lilies tighter, my wedding ring catching the light. 43 years of marriage, and this was how it would end? With his children celebrating my future disappearance? Not if I had anything to say about it. As people continued paying their respects, my mind drifted to a conversation from 6 months ago. Timothy had been sitting in his study, documents spread across his mahogany desk, looking troubled. "Sylvia," he'd said, "I need to tell you something about the will." I'd sat down across from him, noticing the worry lines deepening around his eyes. He'd been watching Andrew and Milani blow through money for years. Failed businesses, gambling debts, expensive divorces. "I've put everything in your name until they prove they can handle responsibility," he'd confessed. "Every account, every property deed, every business share. You're the sole trustee." At the time, I'd protested. "Timothy, they're your children." "That's exactly why I'm doing this," he'd replied firmly. "They need to earn it, not inherit their way to bankruptcy." Now, standing at his memorial service, listening to them plot my demise, I understood his wisdom completely. They had no idea that the power was already mine. Every single asset they were scheming to steal was legally, completely, unquestionably under my control. The irony was almost beautiful. That night, I sat in our empty house, still wearing my black dress from the funeral. The silence felt different now, not peaceful, but charged with possibility. I made myself a cup of tea with shaking hands and sat at Timothy's oak desk. The same desk where he'd signed those papers that made me the guardian of his entire fortune. Andrew's words kept echoing. "We just need her gone, one way or another." The threat was clear. They weren't just hoping I'd die naturally. They were considering helping the process along. I opened Timothy's filing cabinet and pulled out the trust documents. Everything was there. Bank accounts, property deeds, business partnerships, investment portfolios. All legally mine until Andrew and Milani could prove they deserved it. Looking at those papers, I made a decision that would change everything. If they wanted me gone, then gone I would be. But not in the way they expected. I wouldn't cry anymore. I wouldn't mourn in the shadows while they circled like vultures. I would disappear on my own terms, taking every trace of the fortune with me. They wanted to erase me? Fine. I'd erase their access to everything they thought they owned. 1 week after the funeral, I began my vanishing act. I'd spent that week preparing carefully. I moved money between accounts, gathered every important document, and made copies of everything. Safe deposit box keys, property deeds, business contracts, all of it went into a secure briefcase. On Tuesday morning, I packed 2 suitcases with essentials. I left no forwarding address, canceled my phone plan, and closed my social media accounts. As far as Andrew and Milani would know, I had simply evaporated. I drove to a small cottage I'd rented under my maiden name, 3 towns away. The landlord was an elderly woman who accepted cash and asked no questions. Before leaving the house Timothy and I had shared, I took one last look around. 43 years of memories lived in those walls. But I couldn't stay where I felt threatened. I left a single note on the kitchen counter, "Gone to grieve in private. Don't look for me." Then I walked out, briefcase in hand, carrying the keys to their entire future. The cottage was perfect, quiet, isolated, with reliable internet for managing the accounts remotely. I set up my laptop and began monitoring everything from my new command center. Phase 1 of my disappearance was complete. 3 days after I vanished, my neighbor called with delicious news. "Sylvia, you should have seen them," Mrs. Patterson whispered excitedly. They showed up with champagne bottles and party hats. Andrew was dancing on your front lawn. I nearly choked on my coffee. Dancing? Milani kept shouting about how they'd scared the old bat away. They invited half the neighborhood to celebrate. I hung up and sat back in my cottage chair, amazed by their stupidity. They actually thought they'd won. They believed their veiled threats had frightened me into running away, leaving them free to claim their inheritance. What they didn't realize was that by celebrating my departure, they'd just locked themselves out of everything. Without my presence, every account that required dual authorization was frozen. Without my signature, they couldn't access any of the family assets. Without my cooperation, they were completely powerless. I opened my laptop and checked the primary business account. Sure enough, there were already failed login attempts from Andrew's email address. I smiled for the first time since Timothy's death. Their celebration was about to become a nightmare. Let them dance while they could. Soon enough, they'd be scrambling to find me, and I'd be 3 steps ahead of every move they made. A month into my disappearance, my lawyer forwarded their increasingly desperate emails. The first few had been arrogant. "Where are Dad's account passwords?" And "We need access to the business accounts immediately." But as weeks passed, the tone shifted dramatically. Andrew's latest message read, "We can't access anything. The bank says we need Sylvia's authorization. Where is all the paperwork?" Milani's emails were even more frantic. "This is insane. We can't find any documents in the house. Did she take everything?" I printed each email and filed them carefully. Their entitlement was astounding. Even after threatening my life, they expected me to hand over Timothy's fortune like a good little stepmother. My lawyer, Thomas, had been Timothy's friend for 30 years. He knew exactly what kind of people Andrew and Milani were. "They're calling my office daily," he told me during our encrypted video call, demanding I give them access to everything. "What did you tell them?" "That all inquiries must go through you directly." They weren't pleased. I could imagine. For the first time in their lives, Andrew and Milani were discovering that money doesn't appear magically. Someone has to control it, manage it, authorize it, and that someone was me. Mrs. Patterson became my eyes and ears at the old house. Her daily reports were better than television. "They're tearing the place apart," she told me during our morning phone call. "Yesterday I saw them carrying furniture out to the yard. They dumped out every drawer, every closet." I could picture it perfectly. Andrew and Milani ripping through Timothy's study, searching for bank statements, account numbers, safe combinations, anything that might give them access to the money. They found anything yet? Nothing but old birthday cards and photo albums. Milani threw a complete fit when all they found in the safe was your jewelry collection. The safe. I almost laughed. Timothy had given me the combination years ago, and I'd cleaned it out the day before I left. Every important document, every spare key, every backup drive, all safely locked away in my cottage. "Oh, and Andrew hired some men to drill into the basement wall," Mrs. Patterson continued. "Apparently, he thinks Timothy hid a secret vault down there." There was no secret vault. Timothy had been too smart for that. He'd kept everything in plain sight, under legal protections that Andrew and Milani were too greedy to understand. While they destroyed their childhood home looking for imaginary treasure, I was managing a multi-million-dollar empire from my kitchen table. When Thomas called to update me on their legal harassment, I wasn't surprised. "They showed up at my office with their own lawyer," he explained, "demanded I turn over all of Timothy's files. And I sent them away with a very polite but firm letter. All inquiries must go through you." They were upset. I could imagine Milani's face when she realized that even with a lawyer, she couldn't bully her way to the money. Andrew had probably turned red with rage. "They're threatening to sue me for withholding documents," Thomas continued. "I told them to go ahead. Everything is properly filed and legally sound." This was Timothy's brilliance at work. He'd structured everything so tightly that even expensive lawyers couldn't find loopholes. The trust was ironclad. "They'll keep trying," I warned. "Let them. Every failed attempt just proves Timothy was right to protect the assets this way." That afternoon, I received a furious voicemail from Andrew. "You can't hide forever, Sylvia. We'll find you, and when we do, you'll regret making us wait." I saved the recording. His threats were getting more explicit. Soon enough, I might need evidence of their harassment. For now, I was content to let them exhaust themselves fighting legal walls that would never move. 2 months after my disappearance, Andrew made his first public mistake. My friend Eleanor called, breathless with gossip. "Sylvia, you need to see what Andrew posted online." I pulled up his social media profile and nearly gasped. There it was, in black and white. Family dealing with a gold-digging witch who's hiding stolen assets. Some people have no shame. Milani had shared the post, adding her own venom. When someone takes what doesn't belong to them and disappears, what does that make them? I took screenshots of everything. Their desperation was making them sloppy, and sloppy meant evidence. But the post had an unexpected consequence. Several family friends commented, defending me and questioning Andrew's motives. One comment particularly stung him. "Maybe she left because of how you're acting right now." Timothy's former business partner replied directly, "Your father trusted Sylvia completely. Maybe you should ask yourself why." Within hours, Andrew had deleted the post, but the internet never forgets. I'd saved every screenshot, every comment, every angry response. They were publicly destroying their own reputation while I remained safely invisible. Each outburst made them look more unstable, more unworthy of Timothy's legacy. Their downfall was becoming their own creation. 3 months in, I spotted my first hired investigator. I was watering my cottage garden when I noticed a blue sedan parked across the street. The driver wore sunglasses and was clearly watching my house. Instead of hiding, I decided to have some fun. I walked to my front window, smiled brightly, and waved at him. The man nearly dropped his camera. Then I went to my kitchen, made a fresh pitcher of lemonade, and carried it outside. Hot day for sitting in a car. I called across the street, "Would you like some lemonade?" The investigator's face went red. He started his engine and drove away without answering. That evening I called Thomas. "They're having me followed." "I expected that. Are you worried?" "Not at all. Let them waste their money." The next morning I left a note on my door. "For the gentleman in the blue car, there's fresh coffee on the porch if you'd like some." Sure enough, when I returned from grocery shopping, there was a different car parked outside. This investigator was more professional, but I could spot surveillance easily now. I'd lived through decades of Timothy's business dealings. I knew how to handle hired watchers. For every move they made, I was already planning 3 moves ahead. By month 4, their financial situation was becoming desperate. Without access to Timothy's accounts, Andrew and Milani couldn't maintain their expensive lifestyles. The joint credit cards Timothy had given them required my authorization for large purchases, and those authorizations weren't coming. Mrs. Patterson delivered the best news yet. Andrew's fancy car got repossessed yesterday, right from the driveway. I nearly spilled my tea. The BMW? Towed away while he was inside. He came running out in his bathrobe, screaming at the tow truck driver. Even better news came the next day. Milani's boutique, the overpriced clothing store Timothy had funded for her, had closed permanently. She couldn't make rent without access to the family money. I checked the business accounts for my laptop. Every automatic payment they'd expected was blocked. Every credit line they'd depended on was frozen. For years, they'd lived like millionaires without actually earning anything. Now they were discovering what life felt like without their father's financial safety net. The BMW repossession was just the beginning. Soon enough, they'd lose everything they couldn't actually afford, which, as it turned out, was almost everything. Timothy's former business partner visited me in month 5, bringing shocking news. "Sylvia, I had to come see you," Bernard said, settling into my cottage's small living room. I overheard something disturbing. Bernard had run into Andrew at a downtown bar. Andrew was drunk, loud, and bragging to strangers about his plans. He was telling anyone who'd listen that he was going to get rid of the old lady once he found her, Bernard reported. He said she was standing between him and millions of dollars. My blood chilled. "Get rid of me?" Those were his exact words. The bartender looked uncomfortable. Other customers were staring. This wasn't just financial pressure anymore. Andrew was publicly talking about eliminating me. Bernard pulled out his phone. "I recorded part of it. I thought you might need evidence." The recording was crystal clear. Andrew's slurred voice saying, That old witch thinks she can hide from us forever, but when we find her, she'll wish she'd stayed hidden. I'll give you a sworn statement about what I witnessed, Bernard offered. This needs to be documented. I accepted gratefully. Andrew had just graduated from financial harassment to public threats, and now I had proof. In month 6, Milani tried a different approach. My phone rang. I'd kept one number active for emergencies. Milani's voice was honey-sweet, so fake it made my teeth ache. Sylvia, darling, I've been so worried about you. We just want family unity. Can't we work this out? I let her talk for 20 minutes. She apologized for any misunderstandings, claimed she missed me terribly, and suggested we meet for lunch to heal our family. We never meant to hurt you, she lied smoothly. Grief makes people say things they don't mean. I listened patiently to every false word. You know, Milani, I finally said, I heard exactly what you and Andrew meant at your father's funeral. The silence stretched for nearly 10 seconds. I don't know what you're talking about. You said I was old, and that it might not take much to get rid of me. You laughed about getting the keys to everything once I was gone. More silence. We were just... No, I interrupted calmly. And the answer is no to whatever you're really calling about. I hung up and blocked the number. Her fake reconciliation attempt was pathetic. Did she really think I'd forgotten their funeral conversation after 6 months? They'd have to try much harder than crocodile tears and fake apologies. Month 7 brought my most satisfying move yet. I'd been watching the real estate market carefully, and the perfect buyer appeared, a young family with 3 children who needed space and had cash ready. I sold Timothy's mansion for full asking price. The transaction was handled entirely through my lawyer. Andrew and Milani had no idea until moving trucks appeared in the driveway. Mrs. Patterson called me, laughing so hard she could barely speak. Sylvia, you should have seen their faces. They pulled up, expecting to search the house again, and there were strangers carrying furniture inside. What did they do? Andrew started yelling at the new owners, demanding to know where you were. The husband, big fellow, told them to leave or he'd call the police. The new family had no information about me. The sale had been completely anonymous, handled through legal intermediaries. But the message was clear. I could make major decisions about the family assets anytime I wanted, and there was nothing Andrew or Milani could do to stop me. The house where they'd grown up, where they'd planned to search for hidden money, was now legally beyond their reach forever, just like everything else. For month 8, I decided to honor Timothy's memory in a way that would drive Andrew absolutely crazy. Timothy had collected classic cars for 30 years, a 1967 Mustang, a 1955 Thunderbird, and his pride and joy, a 1963 Corvette. The collection was worth nearly $500,000. I donated all of it to the city's automotive museum in Timothy's name. The donation made the local newspaper. Local businessman's classic car collection finds permanent home at City Museum, the headline read. The article mentioned that the cars were donated by Timothy's surviving family, but didn't name me specifically. Andrew's furious voicemail arrived within hours. You can't just give away Dad's cars. Those were supposed to be mine. I've been working on that Corvette since I was 16. Actually, Andrew had never worked on any car. Timothy had done all the maintenance himself because Andrew couldn't be trusted with tools. But the best part came 2 days later. The museum hosted a special exhibition opening featuring Timothy's collection. The mayor gave a speech praising Timothy's generous family for preserving automotive history. Local TV covered the event, interviewing the museum director about the significant donation from the Argent family estate. I watched from home, proud that Timothy's passion was being celebrated instead of sold off by his greedy children. Month 9 brought their most desperate legal attempt yet. Thomas called me, barely containing his amusement. They're suing you for unlawful control of family assets. On what grounds? They claim you're mentally incompetent and therefore unable to manage Timothy's estate. I laughed out loud. After 9 months of watching me outmaneuver their every move, they wanted to argue I was incompetent. Their lawyer filed papers claiming you've disappeared due to diminished mental capacity and requesting emergency control of the assets. How did that go? I sent them Timothy's will, the trust documents, and medical records from your recent physical showing perfect mental health. Case dismissed within a week. The medical records were key. I'd been smart enough to get a full evaluation from Timothy's doctor right after the funeral, suspecting Andrew and Melanie might try something like this. Dr. Williams had declared me mentally sharp and fully capable of managing complex financial decisions. Their lawsuit hadn't just failed, it had created a legal record of their attempts to circumvent Timothy's wishes. Every failed legal challenge made their case weaker and my position stronger. Thomas was keeping careful records of everything. At this point, they're building our case for us. By month 10, their family relationships were crumbling. Andrew's teenage son called me secretly. "Grandma Sylvia? It's Kyle. Can we talk?" Kyle was 16, smart, and apparently fed up with his father's behavior. "Dad's been going crazy looking for you. He yells all the time now. Mom says she's thinking about divorce." "I'm sorry you're dealing with that, sweetheart. Is it true that Grandpa left everything to you?" I chose my words carefully. "Your grandfather wanted to make sure his money was handled responsibly. Dad keeps saying you stole it, but I found something." Kyle had discovered a recording on his phone from months earlier. A family argument where Andrew had admitted they wanted me gone so they could inherit everything. I was recording something else, but I caught Dad saying they planned to get rid of you for the money. "Want me to send it to you?" The recording was damning. Andrew's voice was clear. "We told her we wanted her gone and she took the hint. Now we just need to find where she's hiding our inheritance." "Kyle, thank you for trusting me with this. Dad's not the same person anymore. Neither is Aunt Melanie. The money made them crazy." Timothy's grandchildren were watching their parents' greed destroy the family. It broke my heart, but it also strengthened my resolve. Month 11 brought the recording that would change everything. Kyle sent me a longer audio file, a complete argument between Andrew and his wife about their financial situation. "We're going to lose the house," Andrew's wife said. "The credit cards are maxed, the car payment's behind, and you still haven't found Sylvia." "She has to come back eventually," Andrew replied. "When she does, I'll make her sign everything over, whatever it takes." "What do you mean, whatever it takes?" "I mean exactly what I said at Dad's funeral. She's old, alone, and in our way. Nature just needs a little help." The threat was unmistakable. Andrew was planning to harm me when he found me. I immediately sent the recording to Thomas with instructions to store it safely. This wasn't just evidence of harassment anymore, it was evidence of planned violence. "Sylvia, this changes everything," Thomas told me. "We need to involve law enforcement." "Not yet. Let me handle this my way first." I had a plan that would neutralize Andrew and Melanie permanently, legally, and completely. The recording was the final piece I needed. Timothy had been right to protect his assets from these people. They weren't just irresponsible, they were dangerous. Month 12 was time for the final lockdown. I'd spent nearly a year watching Andrew and Melanie prove exactly why Timothy had distrusted them. Every move they'd made confirmed his judgment. Working with Thomas, I restructured the entire trust with new, impossible conditions. The revised trust required beneficiaries to demonstrate 5 years of steady employment, clean criminal background checks, debt-to-income ratios below 30%, completion of financial management courses, written character references from non-family members. Andrew had been unemployed for 3 years and had gambling debts. Melanie had 2 arrests for check fraud and a bankruptcy filing. Neither of them could meet even one requirement, let alone all of them. "What about the grandchildren?" Thomas asked. "They inherit directly at 21, but only if they meet educational requirements and demonstrate financial responsibility." Kyle and his cousins were good kids. They deserved the chance Timothy never gave their parents. The new trust was ironclad. Even if Andrew and Melanie changed completely, they'd need years to qualify. And based on their behavior over the past 12 months, complete change seemed impossible. Timothy's fortune was now permanently protected from his children's greed. 13 months after Timothy's funeral, I called the meeting that would end everything. The law office conference room felt massive. Thomas sat beside me, folders stacked precisely. Across the table, Andrew and Melanie squirmed in their chairs like guilty children. "Thank you for coming," I began calmly. "Cut the crap, Sylvia," Andrew snarled. "We want our inheritance." I slid documents across the table. These are the new trust terms. Milani read quickly, her face growing pale. What is this? Your father's assets are now held in an irrevocable trust. The beneficiaries are your children, my grandchildren, who will inherit at 21 if they meet specific educational and character requirements. What about us? Andrew demanded. You're not beneficiaries. The silence was deafening. You can't do this, Milani whispered. It's already done. Your father gave me complete discretionary control. I've exercised that control. Andrew's face turned purple. We'll fight this. With what money? You can't afford lawyers without access to the trust. I pulled out my phone and played Kyle's recording, Andrew's voice clearly stating his intention to harm me for the inheritance. I also have recordings of your threats, witness statements about your public harassment, and documentation of your financial irresponsibility. Thomas added, any legal challenge will result in these recordings being submitted as evidence of why the trust changes were necessary. They sat in stunned silence, finally understanding they'd lost everything. 6 months after the trust meeting, I watched their lives completely fall apart. Andrew's house went into foreclosure. Without access to family money, he couldn't make payments on the mansion he'd bought, assuming he'd inherit millions. Milani's credit score collapsed entirely. Her bankruptcy filing was rejected because she couldn't prove legitimate income sources. Their social circle abandoned them. The friends who'd enjoyed expensive dinners and lavish parties disappeared when the money ran out. Andrew's wife finally filed for divorce, taking Kyle and moving across the country. She'd gotten tired of his obsession with money he'd never receive. Milani's husband left too, claiming she'd become impossible to live with. I felt no satisfaction watching their marriages crumble, but I felt justice. They'd torn apart Timothy's family with their greed. Now they were experiencing the consequences. Meanwhile, I quietly established college funds for the grandchildren. Kyle had been accepted to engineering school with a full scholarship. He wouldn't need family money anyway. The irony was perfect. While Andrew and Milani destroyed their lives chasing Timothy's fortune, their children were succeeding through their own merit. Timothy would have been proud of his grandchildren. They'd inherited his work ethic instead of their parents' entitlement. 2 years after disappearing, I made them an offer they couldn't accept. Through Thomas, I proposed paying for therapy and financial counseling for both Andrew and Milani, but only if they signed written apologies acknowledging their threats and harassment. The apology had to include specific admissions, admitting they'd threatened my life for inheritance money, acknowledging their financial irresponsibility, accepting full responsibility for losing access to family assets, promising to never contact me or the grandchildren about money again. Andrew's response came within hours. Go to hell. Milani was slightly more diplomatic. We did nothing wrong. Keep your charity. Their pride was more important than getting help. Even facing homelessness and bankruptcy, they couldn't admit their mistakes. I wasn't surprised. People who threaten elderly family members for money aren't typically capable of genuine remorse. But I'd made the offer publicly, through legal channels. Anyone reviewing the case would see that I'd tried to help them, and they'd refused. The moral high ground was entirely mine now. Timothy had been right about them from the beginning. They were incapable of learning, growing, or accepting responsibility. They'd chosen greed over family and greed over redemption. 3 years later, I experienced my greatest joy yet. Kyle graduated high school as valedictorian and received acceptance letters to 5 top universities. His younger sister got into a prestigious arts program. Milani's children were thriving in school despite their mother's chaos. I attended Kyle's graduation in disguise, dark glasses and a hat, sitting in the back row. When he walked across the stage, I cried with pride. None of the grandchildren knew I was funding their educations. They thought they'd earned scholarships and grants through merit alone, which they had. I was just making sure money never became an obstacle to their dreams. After the ceremony, I overheard Andrew talking to another parent. Don't know how we'll afford his college. His grandmother cut us off completely. The other parent looked confused. Cut you off from what? Andrew couldn't explain without admitting he'd expected to inherit money he'd never earned. That evening, Kyle called me from the graduation party. Grandma Sylvia, I wish you could have been here. I was there in spirit, sweetheart. Dad says you're never coming back. I'm exactly where I need to be. I was. Away from threats and greed, supporting the next generation without enabling the current one. 5 years after Timothy's death, Andrew appeared at my cottage door. I saw him through my window, thinner, older, wearing clothes that had seen better days. His expensive car was gone, replaced by a rusted pickup truck. When I opened the door, he looked defeated. "Please," he said quietly, "we have nothing left." "I know. Milani's living in a one-bedroom apartment. I'm staying in a motel." I handed him Thomas's business card. "If you want to discuss financial counseling or job training programs, call my lawyer." "I'm not calling a lawyer. I'm talking to you." "No, Andrew. You lost that privilege when you threatened my life." "I never. I have recordings." His shoulders sagged. For a moment, he looked like the little boy I'd tried to love when I married his father. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know you are, but sorry doesn't undo 5 years of harassment and threats." He stood there for another minute, then walked back to his truck without another word. I watched him drive away, feeling sad but not guilty. Timothy had known this day would come. Some people only learn through losing everything, and some people never learn at all. Today, I sit in my garden watching my roses bloom, knowing Timothy's legacy is exactly where it should be. Kyle graduated college with an engineering degree and landed a job at a tech company. His sister is studying art therapy. Milani's children are following their own successful paths. None of them are entitled, greedy, or irresponsible. They work hard, treat people kindly, and never expect money they haven't earned. Timothy would be proud. Andrew and Milani are still struggling, but they're working now, real jobs, earning their own way. The trust requirements force them to become functional adults. They'll never inherit Timothy's fortune, but they've inherited something more valuable, the necessity of self-reliance. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh. Then I remember Andrew's words at the funeral. "We just need her gone, one way or another." My disappearance wasn't cruel revenge, it was survival. I protected Timothy's money from people who would have squandered it, and I protected myself from people who would have harmed me for it. The fortune is safe. The grandchildren are thriving. The threats are gone. Timothy had been right to put everything in my name, and I'd been right to keep it there. Justice isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's as quiet as disappearing completely, taking with you everything they thought they could steal. In the end, I didn't just survive their plot to erase me. I erased their power over me instead. And that makes all the difference.